Bass fishing 15 years ago was a lot different than it is now.
We really don't know how far north these fish can survive.
The pure native species that are here in South Carolina are kind of going away.
We're stuck with them. We're not going to get rid of them. I'm Preston Crispin. I'm the freshwater fisheries coordinator for Region 2 with South Carolina DNR out of the Rock Hill office. One issue we're facing here in South Carolina and in the Southeast in general of the United States is the continued movement of the Alabama bass. Most anglers know this fish as a spotted bass. It used to be considered a subspecies of the spotted bass, but it was elevated to a full species in 2008. So it's its own species. The Alabama bass is of course native to Alabama in the Mobile Basin.
My name's Reed McGinn. Born and raised in Fort Mill, South Carolina, right here in York County. I've spent my whole life fishing Lake Wylie and surrounding areas, but specifically I've lived within 10 miles of Lake Wylie for my whole life. The bass fishing 15 years ago was a lot different than it is now. Since the spotted bass have gotten in the lake, there's just more mouths to feed now. The biomass as a whole can't handle all of the mouths that there are to have fed now.
It has been moved around, we believe, mostly by anglers. It's moved over into Georgia first, and then it came into the upper Savannah River reservoirs in South Carolina and Georgia. And then it's moved further and came to Lake Norman, and then from Lake Norman it's really expanded in all directions. It's made it into eastern Tennessee, southern Tennessee, and on up into central Virginia now. It's also way more predictable, so anglers who maybe not be quite as skilled or can easily catch, especially a tournament angler can go and catch their 5 fish if they've fished kind of the same habitat pretty much year round. They're around the same thing. So that's why anglers like them. The Alabama bass come in, they outcompete our largemouth, particularly in reservoirs that have mostly clear water and pelagic bait fish that are swimming around in open water. That's where Alabama bass thrive. And so they compete our largemouth and kind of squeeze them to the fringes. So our largemouth numbers, you see them time after time in any reservoir these things get into. It depends on the lake, but within 5, 10, 20 years, certainly your numbers of largemouth dropped by 75% or more. Lake Norman is a great example. They've gone down to about 10% of what they had been historically. And here in Lake Wylie, we're in the middle of that invasion and expansion right now.
The biomass as a whole of the lake is just not really meant to hold the amount of fish we have. That's why you see, like Greenwood, for example, when I was in college, guys would go there and catch. A buddy of mine that's an Elite Series pro now, he would come home and they would fish Friday nighters, and it would take 25, 30 pounds to win when it's there. That same person told me 2 years ago they went and caught 100 bass and only caught 2 keepers. So I think you see, when they first get in the lake, you see some really big spots come, and then as they multiply and there's just not enough bait for everybody to survive, they get smaller and smaller and smaller.
My name's Andy Wicker, and I'm from Pomeria, South Carolina. I've been fishing for over 30 years since I was real small. My uncle and my father got me into fishing. Started out just fun fishing, recreation fishing like everybody does, and I still do some of that. But as I got a little older, 10, 15 years old, my father started tournament fishing with me. I went to Clemson University. When I got to Clemson, found out it was one of the few colleges that did not have a fishing team. And of course that led me to having to start a collegiate bass fishing team too, so that I could continue my tournament excursions throughout college. Lake Murray's probably right now one of the best largemouth bass fisheries in the country. And it's really good. A lot of big tournaments are coming here. The far upper extremities of Lake Murray, like really far upstream, like close to Lake Greenwood, there are some Alabama bass have gotten in Lake Murray. The hope is that they stay up there, they don't migrate downstream.
And so the other prong of destruction is in our other systems where we have other black bass species. This would be our smallmouth bass in South Carolina and our native Bartram's bass as well, and other bass species throughout the Southeast, but here in South Carolina it's mainly those two. They'll get into this system and they will hybridize with those species easily. They don't do this as much with largemouth. You'll see one here or there, but it's not as common. Their spawning habitats are different, so they don't overlap as much, whereas with smallmouth and Bartram's bass, they overlap a lot, so they will mix And eventually, your smallmouth will be bred out of existence in these systems. And it's been time after time in northern Georgia reservoirs and things, it's been about 10 years, and then you will not see a pure smallmouth anymore unless some are being actively stocked. So they'll hybridize. The first generation of those hybrids will be pretty aggressive fish. The anglers know them as mean mouths, is what they call them. And they can get big still, but as you progress down in further generations, you get more and more Alabama bass alleles mixed into those hybrids and into that population. And so you see a lot more fish that are more like 70% Alabama bass to only 30% smallmouth, and they start getting smaller and smaller and smaller with each successive generation. And eventually you just will not find a pure smallmouth at all. There's some lakes in Georgia where Georgia DNR has not seen a pure smallmouth in over 20 years of sampling, entirely due to hybridization effects.
There's not a lot of great smallmouth in the south, a lot of it up north. Lake Monticello is one of those lakes where you had a lot of that. But they saw the first spotted bass in all their shockings like 5 years ago. Like the very first spotted bass 5 years ago. They shocked them up this past fall. They shocked up like 40-something bass. Actually a little bit more than that. They culled out the ones they could visually see were not smallmouth, and they were left with 40. And of those 40, I think like nearly half of them had some significant Alabama bass genetics mixed in with them. So in just 5 years, they've effectively eliminated half of the full smallmouth genes in just 5 years. So they look like smallmouth for now. They look like smallmouth, but most of them are genetically not pure, because I think they got to be like 93% or over smallmouth to be considered pure. So if someone were to go catch like the new state record smallmouth out of there, which is possible, they likely wouldn't go whatever, wouldn't get approved or whatever. So like I didn't know that until this. So like it's not that necessarily, it's not just that the spotted bass or the Alabama bass are like taking over and that's all you catch, but they're literally like taking over the genetics of the native fish, which is crazy. I did not know that.
But all it takes is one angler to catch a fish on one side of the barrier and throw it in on the other side, because for hybrids you only need one. You don't even need two to be like you would think with an invasive species. Just one fish can hybridize and start producing, and then that whole system will be tainted with hybrid fish and alleles moving throughout the future. And we really don't know how far north these fish can survive, how cold can they tolerate. They're in some very trophy smallmouth bass systems in Virginia, and they're starting to have their effects on those. But so now they're pretty close to some world-renowned smallmouth bass fisheries like the Susquehanna River. They're not very far from there. Then further from that, it would be Lake Erie, which is one of the biggest known ones. And then they're in the river below Dale Hollow Reservoir on the Tennessee-Kentucky border, which is where the world record smallmouth bass was caught. So they're not in the lake yet, they don't think, but they're right there below it. We're stuck with them. We're not going to get rid of them. So our best hope is to stop them from moving to new systems and stop the spread. Just deal with them as best as we can in the systems where they already are. Here at South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, to try to manage this species as best we can and our overall black bass population, some things that we're going to attempt, we're improving or increasing the amount of habitat improvement projects we're doing, specifically looking at habitat that favors largemouth bass. So this would be some aquatic vegetation plantings, things like that, where you get shallow, heavy cover that favors largemouth bass and is not as favorable to Alabama bass. Another thing, an experimental project that we're going to be starting next year is a largemouth bass stocking program here at Lake Wylie. We're going to do it for at least 3 years and see how it goes. We can put a lot of fish relative, fish per acre relative to the size of Lake Wylie, and see if we can kind of push the scales back in favor of largemouth bass just by overloading with fish that we have stocked. We are using brood fish for those fish that are have heavier Florida bass alleles, which have been shown to reach larger sizes and grow a little bit faster. So maybe at least there'll be a few more bigger fish out there for folks to target and catch.
Yeah, any help from local government, DNR, and the stocking program to help really increase the largemouth population would be awesome. I think this was originally a largemouth fishery. It'd be great to see it turn back into a largemouth fishery. Lake Wylie years ago was one of the top 3 lakes in the state. Santee, Lake Murray, Lake Wylie were it 30 years ago. Now it's not nearly as good. So, and again, that's not all because of spotted bass. A lot of that is because of development and the ecosystems just being wiped away with housing and riprap and stuff like that. So it's not all their fault, but there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle.
If you're an angler and you want to kind of help the state and other anglers with this issue, one thing you can do and when you're out fishing is harvest your limit of Alabama bass whenever you do catch them. You need to follow your regulations for your specific water body. They are a little bit different depending on where you are in the state. Follow those regulations, but if you harvest your limit of Alabama bass, we're not going to harvest every single one. That's not possible, but maybe you can at least thin their numbers out so that some of those Alabamas will continue to reach bigger sizes, because once they reproduce a lot, they become stunted and start getting smaller and smaller.
The influx of Alabama bass into our South Carolina fisheries, that's for sure happening by people, in my opinion. Now, whether or not they know the effects of what they're doing, I'd argue likely not. I think if they knew, the effects it would have, I think they would all uniformly say, no, we don't want to do that.
Don't move fish, not just Alabama bass, any fish. It is illegal, for one. Do not move fish from one body of water to another. You have no idea what those consequences can be of moving those fish, and it might be bad. And things like this is what could be the worst case scenario.
In the future, I would hope most of them kind of keep their traditional, sense of fishing, like Santee Cooper lakes, Lake Murray. Those are probably the two most notable lakes in South Carolina that really haven't been affected yet from the Alabama bass. So, I guess my hope is that, I hope Lake Murray and the Santee Cooper lakes, stay intact and keep their largemouth population pure and intact, so that we continue to have these great fisheries. And two, I guess, maybe I would hope that like Lake Greenwood, Lake Wiley, Lake Hartwell to some extent, maybe they could, make some kind of comeback with the largemouth bass population back to what they did look like, 15, 20 years ago.